Welcome, everyone, to another amazing episode of the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast, another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with the incredible and inspiring ray of sunshine that is Emma Kathryn. Emma is a witch and obeah. She is an author and a teacher who lives in the middle of England, where she reads tarot and drinks copious amounts of coffee. That's how I know we're going to be best friends, because coffee is life. I'm still working on my first one of the day. And so I'm happy to meet a fellow caffeine addict. Emma, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you for having me. I always love meeting new people. And this is one of the best things that come with like writing and all of that. It's like meeting new people. I'm excited.
I agree. I wrote my Kitchen Witches Guide to Love and Romance. I wrote it and it released like right in the beginning of the pandemic. And so what was supposed to be like, oh, you're going to go on a book tour, you're going to go here and you're going to do this, turned into, well, fuck, you're stuck at home. And I started like going on other people's podcasts. And then people were like, you're pretty good at this. You should do this. And I was like, no, I don't have time. And I was like, well, fuck it. I got plenty of time. And I'm going to run my own podcast. And I've only been doing it a little over a year. And one of the greatest things has been, like you said, meeting new friends, and specifically people like you that are across the world. Like I would never have the opportunity to meet you. You are in England, right? Right. You're in the UK.
Yeah. So I normally when people are like, oh, are you in London? Like, no, I'm in like the middle of England. So I live in Nottinghamshire. So, I live about 20 minutes outside of Nottingham City, like Robin Hood.
Right.
That Nottingham. So, yeah.
Right.
So I don't live in London. So, yeah. So, in a little rural town. So it's great to meet lots of different people from all over the place.
And you guys are, as the time of the recording this, we're recording this right in the middle of summer. Did I hear on the news you guys are having like horrible record-breaking heat?
Yes. Like it is mental. Craziness. And I like the heat. I am not one to diss like the summertime.
I said it feels it's ridiculous, right? It feels like Satan's scrotum. Like nothing against Satan, but like it feels like Satan's scrotum. And I'm in New Hampshire, so I'm in the northeastern United States, where generally it's cooler. We moved here from New York, and we were like, well, let's go to New England because you get less summer, but it still feels like I want to kill myself. Like, honestly, I was just talking to someone else earlier today, an editor, and she was like, oh, I hope you're all handling the heat well. I'm like, oh, I'm handling the heat great. I'm inside my house with the AC blasting and a sweater on, and I'm not going outside until October. That's just...
Well, this is the thing, because we're not used to like that kind of level of heat. So hardly anyone I know has aircon in their house. So everyone's like dying.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Right, because you guys don't have that kind of weather. No, why would you be prepared for it?
Yeah, our houses are like designed to keep in the heat. Like in winter, and they're all insulated and no aircon.
Oh my goodness. That I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm very spoiled when it comes to like climate control.
It lasted 2 days, so and now we're back to normal. Yeah, now we're back to normal like July weather.
I've never been to the UK. It's a dream bucket list kind of shit for me to get over to where you are.
Yeah, and vice versa, same.
You've never been here?
No, never.
That's kind of cool, because most of the folks I meet from the UK are like, oh yeah, I've at least been to New York, or at least, yeah, it's terrible here. Don't come. Don't people listening, don't write me letters. Don't write me letters. America's a shit show right now. And I don't think that's surprising to hear from anybody. Where I am is very, very nice. But it's not like we're rural England. I mean, come on. That's where the history is. That's where the fairies are. That's where, nothing here's been built more than 100 years old. Do you know what I mean? Like we're babies and we suck. I shouldn't say that. I told you I'm very surly this morning. I'm very surly. Anyway, you're amazing. So you've lived there your whole life. tell us about what an obeah is. So, because I've never even heard that term before, which definitely gives you an idea. Like my witchcraft background, I'm Italian. I grew up in New York. So most of
Uh-huh.
my first introductions into witchcraft, which is why I'm a kitchen witch, they're food related, they're Strega related. And then as I progressed, everything is sort of like, European based
Yeah.
witchcraft. So tell us, for those of us that don't know, what is an obeah?
So obeah is, I call it, so my family, my paternal family are from Jamaica. And so whenever I talk about obeah, that's where like my perspective comes from. Um, so I tend to call it an Afro-Caribbean witchcraft, the form of magic.
Yes.
In Jamaica and in other parts of the Caribbean, it's often associated with malefic or what you might call black magic, you know. Um, so yeah, it's a form of magic that was kind of brought to the Caribbean by enslaved West Africans during, you know, those times, um, both when Jamaica was ruled by the Spanish and the British. Um,
Mhm.
so it's kind of, and I always say, wherever you find obeah, it changes form because, its original form in West Africa is quite different perhaps to how I would practice it. And the same across all of the different islands. Because with the when the enslaved people were brought to that land, on the plantations, you know, there was a mixation of lots of different peoples from different tribes. We talk about Africa, and we don't necessarily tend to think of all the different countries within it, and then even within the countries, um,
Right.
tribes within that one area of land, who have their own traditions and their own beliefs and their own languages. So what you had on the plantations were lots of different people kind of all thrown together, and that was done kind of reduce the risk of uprisings and so on. And so that's kind of, you had a melting pot of people, and um, added to that were the indigenous beliefs from the predominantly Arawak and Taino peoples.
Mhm.
So it's wherever you find it, it's kind of tweaked and different. But I often say there's lots of parallels between like folk magic,
Yeah.
traditional kind of folk magic. Um, you know.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
interesting that you led that with, well, maybe black magic. But I think when people use that term, what they really mean is light and dark and balance,
yeah,
because there is a lot of like in the witchcraft community, and truth, like there is a lot of like woo woo, light and love, and I'm all
yeah,
for that, right? And I try to
yeah, of
live
course.
in that space of positive energy, and to harm none and all of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
oftentimes you go back to like harm none being like the basis of everything.
yeah,
However, there is an element of protection and protecting oneself, protecting one's family. And, I was just having this conversation with somebody else, like mirror boxes. I'm going to do a mirror box spell around myself or a boundary spell or something like
mhm,
that, which is really just, hey, whatever the fuck you're shooting at me, let it go back to
yeah,
you. And that could be kind of like
absolutely,
considered dark, but I don't think
yeah.
so, you know?
No, me either. And like I think a lot of my, I don't know, I'm one of those people where witchcraft is everything. It's in every part of, like, there's no separating the different parts of ourselves. They're all like,
Yeah.
you know, there. And so witchcraft kind of permeates everything for me. And so I grew up in like I still live in a really working class area,
Right.
one of those places where people might, say, don't go down there. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. But, I think that kind of upbringing makes you a bit tougher because you are faced with lots of challenges that perhaps you might not face if you live in nicer areas or nicer,
I would agree with that, right?
you
Yeah, because
know.
you got, like I said,
Um,
I'm from New York originally. We got tough skin when
yeah,
we're born. Like we pop out going,
yes,
what do you what's your fucking problem? What's your fucking problem?
yeah.
Like that's how we immediately, yeah.
There's a song by KRS-One, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's always a lyric in there that I always think, yeah. And it's always like, to stay on course, you've got to roll with force. And I always think, yeah, that's true in life, it's true in magic.
Love that.
And
I love that.
yeah. And so when I talk about obeah, being traditionally seen as black magic. In Jamaica, there was a form of lighter magic called Mile. So that's where the kind of reference comes from. So if you practice Mile, you were kind of healing. But if you practice obeah, it's not necessarily negative, but lots of things fall into that kind of bracket, as you say. So, yeah.
Can you give an example of an issue? Okay, let's say I have an issue with my neighbor. My neighbor is not a good neighbor. Their grass is overgrown. They're loud at night. They stole my deliveries, right? In these two practices, whatever it is, right? In these two practices, these opposing viewpoints of craft, how would one deal with the situation, and then how would the other deal with the situation?
I guess the difference really is, and I can't really speak about Mile because nowadays the term obeah is used to just encompass kind of any kind of magical practice in Jamaica, at least. But I know that within obeah, there is really no limit. It depends on what the person wants and what the obeah practitioner is willing to do, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, there is no kind of moral guidelines and, you know, it's a kind of how I see magic generally. It's neither good nor bad. It just is, and it's the will and intent of the person using it, you know, and their actions and what, you know. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the person going to the obeah person and the obeah practitioner themselves.
Is this a practice that you grew up with? Or did you grow up in witchcraft? Did you grow up in obeah? Or did you find it I kind of get into this with most people I interview on the show because it's really interesting to find out the journeys and the paths of everyone.
Yeah.
How did we all in our separate lives find ourselves on similar paths?
I know.
It's
I know,
right?
Right?
It's amazing.
It really is.
And it's so often interesting to see what the threads are that are similar in our respective lives, you know, like you grew up in the middle of England and I grew up in New York, and yet here we are having a conversation because we have commonality. How did you get here?
I would love to say that, you know, I was taught obeah by my grandma, who was taught it by her, but you know, I think for the vast majority of us, that's not kind of true. It might be like going forward as, you know, our numbers rise and we each have children, and you know, because I have a niece who's kind of into it because like she comes to my house and she likes all of my things, and we do little spells in the garden, and she's like 8 or 9 or something like that, you know. But for me personally, it was just always kind of an interest that was always there. I wasn't necessarily a weird kid, but compared to my siblings and maybe my peers, I was a little bit kooky, or I don't like that word. I don't know why I said that word, but you know what I mean. I wasn't weird.
How do you mean?
Like when all of my friends were like playing Barbie dolls, for example. I would join in the odd time, but 90% of the time I'd either be like with the dogs or reading a book or I don't know, doing something a bit nerdy or, you know. And bearing in mind, I grew up in like the 80s in the middle of England in a very working class area, you know. So I wasn't the same as everybody else. You know.
I take that as a really good sign. I think that was a really good sign, right? Like, I don't know. I was the kid with the Barbies. I was like, let me just put my Barbie and my Ken doll on top of each other.
I mean, when we did play Barbies, our Barbies did have issues. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Total issues. They're totally.
Someone's Ken was having an affair with someone else's Barbie.
Seriously, my Barbies were so fucking slutty. They were so slutty. But then Barbie would turn into a mermaid and she would be, you know, singing to the trees and, you know, like, so like, I get that, like that, what you're calling weird, right? That sort of disconnected from mainstream, but super connected to self and nature. Right.
But for a long time you feel weird because you can't kind of verbalize that or feel it.
Oh God,
But then growing up, you know, my dad's mum was really religious. Like she loved Jesus, you know, but and fair enough, but she never really passed it on to anybody else. It was her own belief. So my dad's not religious, my mum's not religious. We
Right.
were never brought up religious. And I think
Wow.
for the majority of people in the UK, when they call themselves Christians, they probably mean that they celebrate Christmas and Easter. Like most people I know don't go to church, don't believe in the literal God, or
Wow.
um, so religion isn't like a massive part of most most people I know anyway, most people's lives over here. So yeah, we were never kind of. I always kind of describe my mum as being a hippie. So she always wanted to be a Hell's Angel.
I love it so much. I love it so
Always
much.
had like a leather jacket with tassels, and so yeah, it was kind of nice. And then when I started, I can't even remember how I began to think about witchcraft and magic as an actual thing. I read books, lots of fantasy books, lots of kind of fairy tales growing up, and then as you get a little bit older, and then you read the darker fairy tales, and then like you move on to kind of. So I can't really pinpoint the moment I was into witchcraft, but I can remember my mum getting me my first book from the library, and I always forget the author's name every time. But it was called Where to Park Your Broomstick, and it was kind of a little teenager's guide to Wicca. So that was kind of my
Wow.
first in, and I think well, for people in the UK, I think that's most people's in, unless you're raised with parents who have a particular tradition, because back in the 80s, 90s, the internet, most people didn't have access to the internet. All we
Yep.
had was, and I'm in a little rural town, so you had maybe one mainstream bookshop in your library. And so really it was
Right.
whatever was in the library. But then
Right.
it stemmed from there. And, as it does, I think for most people, you kind of find that in, and then it just gets
It
bigger and bigger. And
snowballs from there, right? It's
yeah,
just like then you're getting your
yeah.
hands on everything. And it's interesting that you say, you had said earlier you were the kid who was always reading and you read like fantasy books and stuff like that. Like I was a nerd. I grew up in the same time frame as you, 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm,
And I was always into books, not really books. I be honest with you, I was a really I have a mild dyslexia. So I wasn't a great reader.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I had a hard time with books. And my dad was very scholastic. And like at 13, he handed me Tolkien and he's like, I read this when I was 13 for the first time. So you need to read this. And I was like, I couldn't get through it. I was like,
Uh,
it
which token?
it was probably the first one was probably Lord of the Rings. And then
Wow.
when I said it was too much, I think he gave me The Hobbit and he was like, oh, this is much easier. It's much
Yeah.
smaller. And I was still like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't, it was just too much.
Yeah, of course.
It's too much for my brain now, but I was into like fantasy movies and I was
Yeah.
Legend and Willow
Oh, legend.
right. Like anything that had magic and dragons and wizards and sorcery and I was so drawn
Mhm.
to that, and even that King Arthur and Robin Hood and all of those old
Yeah.
legends. And there's always that thread of magic and adventure through them. And then you get into your teens and you're like, wait a second, is this people are actually witches? That's a thing? Like
I know.
that's a thing. And my upbringing was very strict Italian Catholic, like going
Wow.
to church every weekend. Like
Mhm.
I would go to like a slumber party with my friends in high school, like we would all with a group of friends and we'd all sleep over each other's houses and
Yeah.
stay up late and watch movies. And my parents would pick me up at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning to go to church. You're damn straight I wasn't allowed to miss church. And I sang in church and I taught kids in church. And we were like this super Italian Catholic family. And it's really interesting for me to hear you say that most people in the UK don't have that. Like that's a thing here. Like people like
Yeah.
go to church. Like,
Yeah.
and
I
and
mean,
they're yeah.
yeah. I mean, they do here, some people, but like I think there's always reports that year on year congregations are down, and it's just not a huge part of most people's lives. Of course, there are people who do, who are religious and do go, but yeah.
But isn't it so much nicer when church is your backyard? I don't know. For me anyway, right? Like nature is
Yeah.
the church and coming back to your point earlier when you said, you know, witchcraft is everything we do and that really and I definitely want to really delve really deeper into your book
Hmm.
which is called Witch Life and it's exactly what you're talking about everything being um everything being witchcraft, and the simplicity of it. And I think as we're talking about structured, organized religion
Hmm.
versus witchcraft, right? I mean, obviously, we all, those of us that don't like structure, those of us that don't go with the norm, those of us were the kids that were like, I'm going to play with the dog instead of hang out with the friends over there playing hopscotch. We fit much better into something that is less structured,
Yeah, 100%. It just gives
right?
you that freedom, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
How
I
did
just I
you
can't.
so you found witchcraft with this book, How to Park Your Broom, or
Hmm.
Where to Park Your Broom.
Yeah.
At what point did you discover the obeah side of witchcraft?
It was quite a bit later, to be honest with you. Um, so so I practiced kind of Wicca. You know how you do, you go, but Wicca wasn't really for me. Nothing against Wicca at all. But it just wasn't for me. It didn't fit me. And so, I kind of liked that exploration, and I kind of turned more to the folk side of things. I love folklore. I love folk magic. I love, all of that stuff. I like, all of the ritual and glamour but there's something special about just being able to kind of go to your back garden, go to your house, go to your local area, and use what's there. I think
Yes.
there's something really special about that. And so, I was really quite, I guess, although I didn't feel it at the time, I guess I was more experienced with witchcraft and my own beliefs and more secure in. And for a long time, I think that whatever, I just felt like that there was something missing, because obviously I'm biracial. So my dad's from Jamaica, my mum is white British, um, and so for such a long part of my practice, British or European magic or influences were the main kind of part of it. So
Right.
I always felt that, and my Jamaican family are such a big part of my life as well. My grandparents, the culture, it's such a big part of my life. So I always felt that there was something missing. Um, and so then I kind of started exploring, asking like family members, well, my dad mostly, about obeah, and stuff like that. And then, so that's where it kind of started, I guess.
Was he very familiar with those practices, or did you have to kind of like go back into the generations of your family history to, like you said,
Yeah,
your
I
grandma
mean,
loved Jesus. Which grandma was the one that loved Jesus?
my my
The
my
Jamaican
yeah,
grandma?
Jamaican. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Jamaica is, a very
Yes.
religious country,
Yes.
really religious. So I'd go to my grandma's house, and there'd be pictures in a room of, like,
Yes.
Christ on the Mount and all of that stuff, and that was her belief, and it gave her comfort, and all of that stuff, and each to their
Right.
own. But so in Jamaica, like, there's a lot of things. I was watching a TikTok video, because I just sometimes like, when you've been so busy, you just need something that numbs your brain for 5 minutes.
Yes. 100%.
TikTok is great for
Yes.
that. I mean, there's some really good videos on there, but like
Yes.
sometimes I just want mindless nonsense.
Yes, you scroll. I call it my
I want
dopamine
cat
scroll.
videos or
Cat
people
videos.
falling over.
Every
Or
night before bed, I'm scrolling. I'm like, I need my dopamine. Where's my dopamine? I need my cute kittens. And I look at videos of wombats. I love wombats. They're just the cutest animal on the planet. So I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, there's a video, and the guy was basically saying there's lots of things that Jamaican people do, like, or superstitions that they hold, that are
Mm.
actually related to obeah. For example, like, using blue water, um, eating rice and peas at 9 nights and stuff like that. So, and ask any Jamaican person about duppies, and it's like spirits, malevolent spirits, and that kind of stuff. So there's lots of stories that are kind of related to obeah, but maybe people might not associate with obeah. So, like, it's a great source of information for kind of, when you ask him about, like, ghost stories you tell each other, or what are the folk tales, or
Right.
you know bits where he grew up in, and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. But about the actual practice of obeah, not many people do know, unless they are an obeah practitioner or they're training to be, because it's so secretive, and
Right.
it's an oral tradition, so you'll not find any books. You have to apprentice under somebody,
And you
and there's a
should.
process of it. Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
should, and you should. These are traditional practices
Yeah,
of a people, and it is inappropriate to think that you know what you're talking about if you're not being
yeah,
trained and worked, initiated into
yeah,
these practices.
absolutely, absolutely. And like witchcraft, I think it's so in depth and there's so much to learn, and you never really know it all. Um, so yeah, so he didn't really know a lot, and how I kind of stumbled into it. And I recently told this story to a couple of my own obeah students. So, like I say, it'd be lovely to say like my grandma,
Yeah.
but it's not true. So my grandparents came over to the UK in like the 1950s. So what happened back in the day? So it was after the Second World War,
Yeah.
and the UK had put out like a call to, the Commonwealth countries and the other colonized places, for like, they needed labor to come and build up after the war. London was devastated and all of that stuff. So my grandparents came over, and it's called the Windrush era because the first ship to dock was the HMS Windrush.
Wow.
um yeah, so they came over in the 1950s. So what happened was the husband would come over first, he would get the house, find a job, and then a few months down the line the wife would come over. So my oldest uncle and my dad were the only two of their siblings born in Jamaica. So after a few months or a year or so, my dad came over. And so what would happen was, back in the day, you needed to come over, as an immigrant. You need to stay with someone in their home, so
Yeah.
as a kind of sponsor, I guess, for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the details, but I guess that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
And so what you'd have is large communities of because that was, large communities of Caribbean people. And so I kind of grew up, and my town is quite small. We're like I say, 20 minutes outside of Nottingham, that has quite a large Afro-Caribbean population. But I kind of grew up not really knowing who I was and wasn't related to. Because what I mean by that is, we'd be at, say, my grandma's house, and there would be someone there who I hadn't met before. And my dad would introduce them and say, "Oh, this is your uncle so-and-so." But
Yeah.
anyone who, say, my dad's cousin, if I was a child and it was my dad's cousin, and maybe it's my second or whatever cousin,
Right.
they get introduced as uncles because it's a respect thing, because you wouldn't say this is your cousin because
They're
they're so
elder,
much older.
right? They're older, so
Yeah,
they're the cousin, and yeah.
yeah. So for example, I spent a long time thinking I was related to this one person. I was talking to my auntie about him. I was like, "Oh, yeah, is he your cousin or something?" My dad was saying, my auntie's like, "No."
That's hilarious. That's
So,
wow.
and I can remember being at a close family friend's house, and by this time I was already into witchcraft, and I kind of knew a little bit about obeah, but not a lot. And a lot of the tools are quite similar,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty open. So if you come into my house, it's quite clear that I do something. If you don't know about witchcraft, then you might just think I've got a weird taste in decor.
Oh, you can always tell when you
But
walk into a witch's house. Always, like, there's an air, there's an energy,
yeah,
and you're like, and I often feel like I have a friend who lives up the road, and like she's got like 17 ancestral altars as soon as you walk in,
yeah,
skulls and dead things and whatever. And I'm just like, I am totally not witchy enough. Like, you are the witchiest witch that I know. You know what I mean? But there's always something. You can always, if you
yeah.
know what
So
you're
you
looking
don't,
for.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
can remember being in this person's house, and I'm seeing some of these things, and I'm thinking, and I thought it a few times. I've been around a few times now.
Yeah.
In the back of my, and then one day I just got up the courage to kind of ask if they practiced witchcraft, and that's kind of how it came apart. And I kind of begged, and like, for them to teach me, and finally they relented and did, because it's quite a big commitment.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then
Yes.
finally they did. So yeah.
That's amazing. So how did you go from this, just this learning stage and kind of absorbing everything that you could absorb, and everything, to now, like you said, you have your own OBS students and you're writing books on witchcraft. Like, how did
I,
you make the
when
transition to teacher?
I don't know. Well, when I think about it, it's kind of crazy. So for a long time, I worked in retail, and you get quickly disillusioned with. I think when you're working
Humanity.
class and poor,
Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to get disillusioned with humanity just in
Humanity.
general.
Yeah. If anybody ever wants to feel like shit about themselves, go work in retail. It's terrible. And we've
Yeah,
all done it. We've all done it. Like it's
yeah,
something that like it's part of life. You have to do it. And people that can make a living in retail, like cheers to
yeah. Fair
them.
play to them.
I mean,
Yeah, it's not for me.
that's a vocation if I ever heard it. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I used to tell my partner that most people are indifferent. Few people are nice, and then there's more rude and just awful people than you would even imagine.
yeah,
you know,
it's true. True story. True
yeah.
story.
But so I can remember always being disillusioned. I mean, and now I'm a teacher and I love my day job. So, but back then I was really disillusioned, and I always knew that I wanted to write, but I always thought it would be fiction. Weirdly,
Oh, wow.
I know, strange. Um, but then, so I did my degree, did some coursework, and you do lots of. I did a creative writing course because
Mhm.
fiction writer, um, and so I had lots of kind of pieces of coursework that were essays and
Yeah.
short stories. And we used to follow this website. I came across them on social media, and I think they were called Dear Darkly or something like that. And it was just kind of all sorts of dark or culture. So they did all sorts of it, but it was fun. Like it was kind of tongue in cheek and quite fun. Um, and they put a call out for writers. So they were having this. They were having their own little kind of program where you would study with them for 6 weeks, and they'd talk you through their style and what they were looking for. And all through that 6 weeks, you'd be working on an article that would go for publishing with them. And at the end of those 6 weeks, they would decide whether they wanted the article or not.
Wow. What a
Um,
cool thing.
I know it was really good.
Yeah, really
Um,
cool. Practical,
uh,
practical
yeah,
knowledge. And then like this, that's fantastic. And good for you. And so you took this course. Like most people don't
yeah,
take that leap. They'll go,
I
oh,
know.
that sounds
Well,
interesting.
I'd done that for a long time. I'd seen lots of like call because I think that's one of the good things about social media. Most of my writing opportunities have come about through social media because I follow someone and they've shared a call for submissions or
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Um, and that's one of the great things about it. But anyway, so I went through it all, and it was going good, but they didn't want my finished article. It was about poison plants, and they didn't want it. And I was like gutted, and that was it. That was it. I tried and failed. That was it. I was gonna hang up, put the lid back on my pen and do away with my notebooks. And I'm quite dramatic.
I'm never writing again.
So like I was just bemoaning to my younger sister. She lives like down south, close to London. She was on the phone. I'm like, oh, because I'd been telling her about it, and she was asking about it. And I'm like, oh, they didn't want it, so I guess that's that. And she's like, oh, Emma, she's surely like look around, fun. So I did. So I was like, thought right. I put my big girl pants on and kind of had a look around, and then I found Which Way magazine, and they had a call for submissions. So, and I really liked this article that I'd written. Like,
Yeah.
even now, I really liked it. So I thought, right, I'll send it to them. So I sent it, and it was like, with a little covering letter. And then I went to my uncle's barbecue. So came home quite drunk and forgot I'd sent the email.
Hmm.
So I was just like, I don't know, you're on your phone checking, and I'd got an email back from them, and they loved it, and now I'm still a staff writer for them. So that was really
What?
where it snowed. I know.
What?
I
What? But this is important shit, okay? Because
yeah,
people always want to know, like, how do I go and do this? And oh, it'll never happen for me. And oh, I tried it once and it didn't work out. And I think it's so important for people listening to hear these stories of you are now a successful book author.
I know, it's still mental even to
It's
think about it.
it's totally mental. Okay, my book is like going to be 2 years old this summer. And whenever anybody's like, can you sign this? I'm like, oh my God, really? Oh my God, you want me to, oh my God. But the thing is that these opportunities present themselves. And I think
Mhm.
we as witches specifically need to remember that we are fucking powerful, and
Absolutely.
what we put out, we get back. I think that's true for everyone, witches or not. What you put out into the
Yeah.
universe, you get back. But we as the witches are more aware of these things. So here you saw this great opportunity to take this 6-week course, and you were like,
Hmm.
you follow that gut instinct. And even when it
Yeah.
didn't work out the way you wanted it to, you took that risk because of intuition, because spirit was like, you need to do this. Here's this other thing. Here's this other thing, because you were meant to do it. So the universe
Hmm.
and the gods kept giving you these opportunities. Like, this one didn't work. Here's this one. Here's this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because you are who you are, you listened and you went, yes, instead of going, oh, it's not for me.
Yeah. And like, so that is me anyway. So I know I'm like that. And my partner, so I used to box and kickbox competitively, like in the
I
ring.
just fell in love with you. That is so fucking badass. And it's a little hot. I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you.
It's kind of hot. It's kind of hot. I love a woman who can kick an ass. I'm just saying.
But so like, and I used to love it. So like, anytime my coach would, and I'd be like, right, I'm not fighting them, I'm too bored that. But then my coach would say, Emma, I've got this match up for it. I'm like, oh, go on, man. But you know, when you're fighting, so I always, and I don't know, I grew up with like 3 sisters, and my youngest sister is a bit younger than all of us. But like, there's about a year and a half between me and the next one up. So we always used to fight like cat and dog, like
Yeah.
fisticuffs fight.
Yeah.
Um, so it was nothing new, but it's different, you know, when you're in the ring, because it's that controlled aggression. It's not like in the heat of the moment where your sister just pissed you off and you want to slap her face and she's going to slap you back, and you know, it's
Right.
not that.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's
Right.
very different. It's a weird mindset to put yourself in, and you go through like your training camp and you're training really hard, and you know, you're picturing it. But then the closer it gets to fight night, the nerves start to kick in. And I'm usually, when I'm in public, I'm very good at keeping those nerves in control. But then when I'm at home, when I'm in like my comfort zone, my safe space, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? And like, I'd be like to my partner, oh my God, what if she's like 6'2" and you know, I'm 5'1", by the way.
No, I completely get it. I completely get it. Cause I'll be the same way. I'll be like, I have all these amazing, huge opportunities and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then I'll be like, so the same day with my partner, I'll be like, babe, I got this book deal and this thing happened. And I just wrote like 4 chapters. Oh, I'm so awesome. And then literally I will leave the room. I will get a cup of coffee. I will come back and I'll be like, what if it sucks? What if they don't like it? What am I gonna do? Oh my God, crippling self-doubt, right? Like,
And so in those moments, I really need my partner, and he always does it. He'll say, for God's sake, Emma, get a grip. You know, you've trained hard for this. He said, if you were
yes,
at home and you know your opponent was in the street and giving you some jip, you'd be the first one to say, piss off, you know.
right,
And it's
right.
true, we kind of forget ourselves in those moments. Everyone has
Absolutely,
those moments.
absolutely.
But then, you know, you get in the ring, and I think this is where kind of I see the parallels with magic and fighting, you know. You get in the ring and it's almost like you enter that, you know, when you're doing a ritual. Okay, so you're getting ready for the ritual. Um, Sometimes you might not feel like it, you can't be asked. But then when you start, it's almost like there's that shift in your mind. And it's the
Yes.
same with when you get into the ring and it's real and your opponent's there and and then it just becomes automatic and it's great, you know. After
I
that moment of
Yes, 100%. And I think that's so important. And I love this, using this as the segue. It's perfect. Is that back to this, everything is witchcraft, right? That
Mhm.
there is our our inner voice and how we speak to ourselves and how we speak with our inner voice to ourselves, and that, oh my God, what am I doing moment. But then when you're faced with the situation, that goes away and we realize we're standing within our power. And that can happen at any moment, whether it is a fight, whether it is writing a book, whether it is going to a job interview or a first date or
Yeah.
whatever. The minute you're in that, your mindset switches and you go, oh, wait, I am a powerful being. This
Yeah.
is where I'm supposed to be at this moment. And I'm going to
Hmm.
breathe into that moment and ease through it, and do whatever I
Yeah.
have to do. And I think that's powerful witchcraft of the self mastery mindset.
Yeah.
I think that's so
Really is.
right, so important. And that just goes back to this everything we do is witchcraft, the way we move through our lives, the way we move through the world, the way we relate to other people. And so, on that note, I want to take a quick break here from our sponsors, and then I want to come back and really dive deep into these ideas of everyday witchcraft and your book, Witch Life. We will be right back with the amazing Emma Kathryn. We are back on a very fun episode of Conversational Witchcraft with Emma Kathryn. And before the break, we were talking about the ideas of everything we do being witchcraft. And you're writing this book, Witch Life, which,
Hmm.
okay, so I got all these books from Llewellyn, and they get delivered. If I'm going to interview somebody, Llewellyn will send me copies of the
Yeah.
books. And
Oh,
this,
how lovely.
it's really great. It's pretty great. They're like, okay, here's a bunch of authors. Here are things that we think that would be nice for your listeners. And I get to go through and go, this person sounds awesome. Oh, I love this one. I like that book, whatever. And they'll send me the books, which is amazing. So this book came in a package into my office, and literally, I shit you not, 3 people in my office were like, oh, can I have that? Can I have it? I'm like, you can't have it until I'm done with it. And there's a post-it note in here from one of them that's like, when you're done with this,
If someone's
I
claimed it,
want
have
it. Yep.
they?
They've claimed it. And I'm like, that's
I
not going
love
to
that.
happen. I'm just going to have to buy you your own copies. This is my copy. But really what you go over in this book is what I love. Okay. Is that it really is basics. It is these principles of everything we do is witchcraft. So let's incorporate it into our everyday lives. Now, as a kitchen witch, that's part of what I love about my own practices is that I make time to
Hmm.
eat every day. I make time to make food every day. And so I can practice my craft in an everyday way. And that's really a lot of stuff that you go over in here is practicing in an everyday way. And I think it's needed. I don't think there can ever be too many books like this because they speak differently to different people. But why did you decide to write this? And why did you decide to do it at this particular moment in time?
So I wrote it in the first UK lockdown, and like the last few years have been a bit crazy. So I can never really remember if that was 2019 or 2020. I think
2020,
it
I
might.
don't, 2020,
It,
20.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think
What
it was
year are we
2020.
in of the
But
pandemic? Where are we now?
20, I know, right? That's what it's done to us all.
Just read an
Um,
article this
and
morning that
so
was like case numbers are going back up with a new variant. I'm like, it's the Twilight Zone. It's fine. It's totally fine.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote it in the first lockdown. And during that time in the UK, so if you could work from home, you worked from home. So I work in a specialist SEND school. So it's it's autism specific. So we work with children with ASD, autism, and lots of our children, um, you know, the COVID was kind of a scary time for lots of people for lots of different reasons. And for people who have maybe other diagnoses or profound and serious medical conditions, it was so new at the time. And, so our school kind of closed down. So our pupils went to remote learning. Our support staff who work with so our children have like key staff, it's one-to-one. So their support staff, where possible, went to their homes just to support because, it was such a big shift and change for the pupils. I did remote learning, so I did some lessons. And, our pupils have autism, so mostly it wasn't learning, but it was nice to check in with them, kind of have a chat, kind of discuss learning-based topics, but in a fun and relaxed way. So that was really good. But I found myself working from home. And when I wasn't doing scheduled calls with pupils, I found myself doing really odd hours, like working hours, like my whole kind of sleeping pattern changed and everything, because it was so drastic. Like that lifestyle change was
Yeah.
so drastic and happened so quickly. So like back then, I think you were allowed out for an hour a day for exercise, unless you were going to work or to the shop. And back then it was only like essential shops, like food shops and so on, that were open.
Right. Right.
Um,
Essentials.
yeah. So it was a
Wow.
bit crazy. So, and I found myself kind of, I don't know, it's weird when you start working from home and you're not used to it, you know. So
Yeah.
I'd wake up like really ridiculously early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning. So then by 5 in the morning, I was maybe doing some planning, or, you know, I don't know, do it was, and so, and the same in the evening. And then I had this chunk of space in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And for a while, you know, it's a novelty because I've always worked or had children. So it's always, you're busy, you're busy, you're busy, you're busy. So having this free time in the day, at first I really struggled with it, you
Yeah.
know, which is weird when you work so hard, because you spend so long thinking about, if only I had some free time, I'd do this, 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 and this.
But the forcedness of it, and the fear,
Yeah,
and the drama globally, and it's, there was nothing relaxing about any part of the lockdowns. You know what I,
yeah,
like, you were like, oh, this should be great because look, I can sleep in and I have all this free time. And at the same time, you're like,
yeah,
how the fuck am I going to pay my bills? And what if I can't go back to work? And what if this and
yeah,
what if that? So like, you might be doing nothing, but your brain is on fire,
yeah.
And like you
And
said,
I
that
found that,
adjustment is impossible.
yeah, it's so weird because my work day as well, it's in a school, so, and I teach, so my day is very structured when I'm at work. And then
Yeah.
in my home life as well, it's quite structured because I write, and then I've got family, so I have to have a quite
Yeah.
structured life, otherwise it just be chaos. And there's nothing wrong with chaos, but yeah, I have deadlines and shit. So
I'm too type A for chaos. I schedule my chaos.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
I can have chaos for 20 minutes every other Friday night. That's it. Like
Yeah,
that's when I can, yeah, that's it.
exactly. So, you know, it was really weird for me, and I think that, so I found myself in a bit of a rut. So I don't know. You you think it's great at first. So in a week, you've watched whatever you wanted to watch on Netflix, you know, and then yeah, and I think it was only my practice, my witchcraft and obeah practice, that really kind of kept me a bit sane, kept me,
Yeah.
my routines going, you know. So on
Yeah.
this day I'd do this, on this day it was this time for this ultimate. So, you know,
Right.
it kept me kind of sane. Um, and I just thought that actually, I don't know, it kind of inspired me to write the book, to get people to actually practice, because we spend so long, and, you know, I'm guilty of it as well. I always do it. I'll spend so long researching something, and I love research because I am a nerd. But then when it comes time to do it, you know, sometimes your comfort zone is to go back and just, oh, maybe I'm not ready yet, maybe I'll, you know, but actually just going and doing the thing, making the mistake, you know, that's how you learn. That's really how you develop. So
Yeah.
I wrote the book because I wanted people to go out and try these things, just try them. Um,
Right.
but also try them how I've written them in the book. But then, you know, if you think something's wrong, change it. Change it based on what you have. Change it on what you feel. You know,
Yeah.
nothing's rigid. Um,
Yeah.
I can always remember one of my obeah students asking if I had like a book or any recommendations for, say, a book of invocations for the obeah spirits. There's no such thing exists, not that I
Right.
know of.
Right.
Um, I said, and even if they do, I said, they're only written by other people. There's nothing ultimately special about them other than that that's that person expressing their deep
Right. That's
relationship
their
and what
point
they,
of view, and those are their rituals. And that's right. Like I always say,
yeah,
like you can only teach what you have, your own experiences. You know what I mean? Like or
yeah,
what, this is what I
absolutely,
do. So take what I do, and take what works for you
yeah,
and leave the rest. Right. And I
yeah,
think,
absolutely,
you really nailed it. Calling the subtext of the book being a practical guide for making everyday magical, because as witches, and it's something that I talk about with kitchen witchery, we kind of wish that we could be doing all these things all the time. And it's funny that you point out that, like, even within a pandemic where you'd be like, you know, oh, well, now I have all this time to do these super deep rituals, and I could be planning, and I could be doing this, and I'm going to celebrate every sunset and every sunrise and blah, blah. There's still like a million, like we still have lives, we still have jobs, we still have homes and children and pets and spouses
Yeah,
and things that, we have to take care of. And so to break these things down in a more practical way and go, oh, right, tonight's full moon. Let me just flip this open and go, oh, yeah, look, here's a good full moon thing I can do. It's going to take me 15 minutes. That's great. We
yeah,
need that sort of thing in our practical lives as witches so that we do stay tethered. As you said, that magical practice and that obeah practice is really what tethered you to spirit during a time of upheaval, being the
yeah,
pandemic.
yeah. And I just think if you wait for that special moment, and don't get me wrong, I always, you know, I love a good full moon ritual when I
Sure.
manage to get to one.
Sure. Yes.
There's great, great, great stuff. But I think if you're always waiting for that moment and then it comes and goes and you miss it for whatever reason, you think, oh well, never mind, I'll wait for the next one. You're always bloody waiting,
Waiting for the
you
next,
know,
always
and you
waiting for the
never do
next.
the thing, and you
Yeah.
never do the thing. So if you can
Right.
make your life as magical as possible, and there are many ways to do it in, lots of different ways, then you're always practicing that craft. You're always honing your skills. You're always
Mhm.
building that connection to spirit, to your own practice, to yourself. Um, yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I love that you said that, you're always creating that magical practice with self, because it is, as we talked about at the very, very beginning, it is an evolution of practice. And as we learn and we grow and we change and we adapt within our own spiritual practices, but having those basics down is so important. And that's kind of also how, like, maybe you have this experience as well at bringing people into your practice. Like, here's something very basic that I can do to celebrate, as the time we're recording this, it's going to be Llamas 1st of August,
yeah,
first harvest, right? Coming up. And how do I want to celebrate that with people that aren't necessarily identifying as witches and
hmm,
pagans? Oh, well, I can do this incantation over a bread that I'm going to bake. And then I can serve that to people that I'm going to eat a meal with. And so we can celebrate these things together and stay tethered into that spiritual practice.
yeah, yes, absolutely. It's a great way of that. And I also think that, so in the books you'll find several different things to do around the full moon or the different moon phases
Mhm.
or, the different Sabbats. There's several different things to do. And the idea is like, if you want to do all of them, great, fun times,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
have the time, fantastic. But I think I often see those times. So whatever moon phase, say the full moon or the dark moon, or say it's going to be Lammas soon, or Yule. I always think that we tend to think of them, and I think it's because of our kind of our lifestyles. We're always on the go. We think of what's next, what's next, what's next. So we always, the date comes and we say, right, it's going to be Lammas on the 1st of August. And then the 1st of August comes and you do your thing, or maybe you don't. And then it goes, and then it's like, right, done now, on to the next. But I don't tend to see them as that. I tend to see them as maybe the markers of the season. So, energies come in ebbs and flows. So it'll start with a trickle and grow and grow and grow to the peak, which might be Lammas or whatever you're celebrating at the time. But that
Right.
peak, it might start to dip a little bit, but you don't tend to notice that dip. So um, I think if it's, say you're busy on the first, say you're at work, real life gets in the way of our magical
Right.
shit all the time,
All the
you
time.
know.
Yeah.
So you might not have time for a fancy ritual. You might not have time to do all of these things. So, but there's things you can take from the book from around that time, adapt them if you need to, but you can do them at any time around that time. You've got the day
Yes.
before or the day after. It doesn't have to be exactly on that day. You can still give thanks. You
Right.
can still honor. You can still work with those energies. They're still there. They haven't just quickly gone and
Right. Right. And I think that's a really important point to make as well, is that this is not what we practice as witches. And I'm using witches and pagans as a blanket term,
yeah,
right? What we practice is not so rigid, where, like, you have to go to church on this day because this day is Easter Sunday. And this is the day you have to say these particular prayers and do this particular ritual. Like, that's not how our spiritual stuff works, right? Oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe, a star falls on a Wednesday and you've got a big work meeting, or your kid has band practice, or you got to
Yeah.
take the dog to the emergency room because he ate a shoe. You can you can then say, oh, well, I've got a couple of days next week where things settle down. And so, because everything is, specifically when we're talking about seasonal stuff, you've got 4 seasons in the year in most places on the planet. And then you also have, the way the wheel of the year turns, right? So you
Yeah.
could say, I have these 6 weeks in this season to
Mhm.
celebrate, or these
Yes.
8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, I love the analogy that you said, Emma, of the energy trickles, and then it might come to a peak and then it will trickle away again. And I don't even know if I would say it trickles away or if it just changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
I love that analogy so much. I'm wondering, was there anything particularly challenging for you in writing this whole book? Because you write smaller chunks, right? You write
Mhm.
articles and short
Yeah.
things. So was there anything about writing this full book that you found really challenging?
Um, I think the challenging bit as so writing that, so it's so wide and varied. The challenging bit was actually deciding what would go into the
Mm,
word count, and then I always struggle with the second and the second draft and
the
word counts and
edits. Ah,
yes. Thank God for editors. That's all I'm saying.
I,
Thank
I
God for
wouldn't
their
want that
direction.
job.
Me
I
either.
I know.
They are angels in disguise.
I love particularly, I love, and I you could see I even earmarked the page here. I love that you added a chapter about tarot. Um,
Yeah.
I really love that. And I'm going to tell you why. I am not a witch that practices tarot. I don't read tarot. Okay. I love oracle cards because they're not so
Yeah.
structured, and I can have a different relationship with every single deck, right? I have a
Mhm.
fairy deck, I have an empath deck, I have, this thing and that thing. And so I can have a different relationship with every single one of them, and I can work with different energies, a goddess one, an angel one, every single one of them. And I'd be like, oh, I feel like angels today. Let me talk to my angels. Oh, I
Mhm.
feel like fairies today. Let me talk to my fairies. But tarot is so much more structured, and it doesn't matter what pretty card you're going to get. Tarot is always going to tell you, like, bitch, please, this is what has to happen right now. And
Uh-huh.
I find tarot intimidating for those reasons. And I'm starting to get, I just got my very first actual tarot deck a few months ago, and I've been dabbling.
Oh,
Um,
how exciting.
and I was very drawn to the artwork. And then I
Mhm.
was like, but it's tarot, and my partner was like, you need this deck. You have to have it. And he bought it for me and surprised me with it. And I'm like, well, it's really expensive, so I better start using it. Um, you know what I mean? I'm like, you spent like $100 on this deck. It's beautiful. I gotta use it. I don't want to just sit there. But I love that you've gone into the basics of tarot, because I do think that a lot of witches, especially people that might be entering into this path, maybe like me, intimidated by tarot. So can you tell me, like, why you chose to put a whole chapter on tarot in your
Uh-huh.
practical guide?
Yeah. Well, I too was intimidated by tarot, and for exactly those same reasons, because I think as witches we are drawn to them, maybe because we're supposed to be, or everyone's always banging on about tarot cards, so you feel that perhaps you should own a deck or two, and if not tarot cards, But like you, I would be a tarot connoisseur because I am drawn to the artwork, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I have several different decks. Because I'm drawn to the artwork. But realistically, I probably use two. If I was rich, I would have antique. I'd have like, ah,
Right. A room full of
yeah,
tarot decks. Yes. 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 I
yeah, all
agree.
sorts. They'd be all sorts. But I was. also kind of put off. And you try. So you get your little book or you buy a book, and there's just something so fucking mind-numbingly boring about learning shit by rote, you know.
Yeah.
We don't. I work with kids. We don't teach like that, you know. Having to sit there and memorize meanings for all of these different cards. I can't think of anything worse, you
Yes.
know.
Yes. I agree. I agree.
And so it is really intimidating, and I was intimidated too. And so for a long time, the kind of my first tarot deck sat in a drawer, kind of untouched. Apart from I'd pull them out every now and then, have a shuffle, and you know, not really kind of do anything more with them.
Yeah.
But then I kind of really wanted to. I don't know, something kept pulling me back to it, but I thought I can't keep doing the same thing because it's not working. Um, and so I kind of started this exercise. So I would take 1 or 2 cards a day too, because I'm a bit impatient as well, and I think, shit, there's all these fucking cards, it's going to take forever. So I do 2 cards a day, but no more. So, and I'm a bit kind of, so I had to do them in order. So and I think this exercise is in the book. And I always suggest it for everyone to do if you want to learn tarot, and not in that boring way of just reading, you know, the given definition. And so I suggest that, you know, you take your book that you get with your deck, and you just put that to one side, and then you take the card and you just look at it. Okay, you just look at the card, you look at the colors, you look at the images, you look what's going on in them, anything that kind of catches your attention. So you're just looking at them and kind of, and I think what happens when you look at images and symbols anyway is that you begin to put your own narrative to them, you begin to make sense of them in your own way. And then, so what I ask my students to do when I'm teaching tarot workshops, for example, is I'll ask them to do this exercise. I'll ask them to look at the card, to look at colors, and look at what's going on, all of that stuff that we just said. And then I'll say, well, what does that mean to you? What do those colors make you?
Yeah. You accidentally put yourself on mute. That's okay.
I'm sorry. No,
it's
I think
totally
it happened
that's
because I had a call come through and I just had to
oh, did you?
Oh, I'm on my phone.
That's why we have a producer who can cut that out. So start over. You said you look at the colors of the card, you look at the symbols, and blank.
Yeah, so you look at the colors, you look at the cards, and you kind of have to ask yourself, what do these mean to me? So, you know, what do these colors mean to me? If the card is mostly dark, and you know, what does that mean to you? Is it a scary place or is it a safe place? And then you let your own intuitions kind of form that meaning around that card for you, you know. And then, so after we've kind of explored that, and I say, right, now go to your book, find the kind of page for that card and read through it. And quite often people come to similar, if not exactly, I mean, some people have widely different ones and that's fine, but a lot of people, they kind of come naturally to the definitions similar, or to similar definitions that are in the book anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's how they're designed to work. They're designed to work with, you know, our minds and the symbolism and the colors and all of those thoughts and feelings. And there's one time, so I used to kind of be in a little working group with some friends. And one night, so we used to meet every 3rd week of the month at someone's house, and we'd do like magical things, and it was fun times. Sometimes we'd just eat snacks and gossip, but most of the time,
also fun.
Yeah, yeah. But most of the time we would do something. So one night we decided that we'd all kind of practice with the tarot. So what we decided was we split up into we'd do a round robin basically of reading for each other in different rooms, so nobody was hearing what anybody else said. And at the end, we kind of all came together to discuss our experiences and to kind of pick up on what worked and what didn't. Because, you know, that shit's fun.
Yeah.
And I always say people should do this with the tarot. They should just have fun with it. You know, get your girlfriends round, open a bottle of wine, and just have fun and a giggle. It just takes away that kind of
the pressure.
Yeah.
The pressure that like, oh, I'm not a good enough witch because I don't read tarot, or what if I get it wrong? That doesn't matter. Just have a good time and commune with that deck. Like everything's energy, right? So you need to commune with it. You need to like have a moment with the deck so you can get to know it and it can get to know you, I think.
Yeah. So what was really interesting in the discussion part at the end, one of our friends who I'd read for him and our other friend had read for him, and he said what was interesting was that although he'd drawn totally different cards from both readings, actually the messages he was getting were quite similar. That isn't that like crazy? It was just like, wow, that's so,
Wow.
so I think the tarot works like that. It works
Mhm.
with our own lives and our own meaning and the spin we put on things. So even if, you have your rote meaning, but you might kind of not agree with it exactly. So I think it's like we've said, take what works for you and discard what doesn't, because you have to kind of incorporate it into your own. It has to make sense in your own mind, otherwise you're never going to
Absolutely.
feel that connection.
Absolutely. And that's why I love that you put that in here, because if this is a true practical guide to witchcraft, and it really is, um, that's something that is very practical that so many people might shy away from. And you've really broken it down into basic exercises and made it easier to and less intimidating to approach. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. Um, what do you hope? What do you hope people will get from this book, Witch Life?
I hope that it will just encourage people to start doing. And I think that, and we all do it, we read. Everybody's an expert. Everyone online's an expert, and you read and you believe what they say. And,
Right.
I read online that you shouldn't do this, and I read online that you shouldn't do that. But
Right.
why shouldn't you do it? So I think at the very, at the, I don't know, for me, I hope that people, it encourages them to explore, to just have fun with it, to not take it too
Yes.
seriously, because I mean, it is serious shit. And my witchcraft and my obeah practice are extremely serious to myself. But I think you also have to have fun with it, because like I say, it's such a big part of our lives. It's there in the sad times, the happy times. It's our comfort and our joy. And so I think it's important that we're able to have fun with it. If we're too serious all the time, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants. That's amazing. Emma Kathryn, the book is called Witch Life, a practical guide for magic, for making every day magical. So Emma, tell us where we can find you online, on Facebook, Instagram, where we can buy your book, all that jazz.
Okay, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Emma Kathryn Wild Witch, and Twitter as well, Emma Kathryn Wild Witch. I am recently new to the world of TikTok. On there, it's Emma Kathryn Obeah Woman.
Love it. Love it. She's ticking and she's talking. I have yet to begin with my TikTok
I
journey, but
know
I'll get
it's
there.
fun. It's
I'll
fun.
I'll get there. Okay. And to buy the book, Emma, where can we buy the book?
Llewellyn, obviously, but all good bookstores and
All
websites.
local good bookstores. Go
Yes,
support your
check out
local
your local
bookstores.
ones first.
Local, local,
Yes,
local, anywhere
absolutely.
books are
Yeah, and
sold.
they can order it too. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say that I love, this is going to sound really weird. I'm a very tactile being. I love the feel of this book and it's right.
I
It's like,
know.
I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like flocked. It's like soft
I
and
know,
it's
right?
chunky and you really want to hold it. And I'm the worst person in the world because
I
I love
know.
to make my books like, I like them to be weathered. So I earmark everything, a dog ear everything. And then I like
Me
break
too.
binding. And
Yeah,
I
to the
feel like,
disgust of most of our readers, yes.
yeah, right. But yeah, people are like, oh, how could you break binding? Oh, and I'm like, no, I want it. Like, I want like, if you have my book, I
Yeah,
want it to
I
be
know exactly
filthy.
what
I
you
want it to
mean.
be stained. It's a cookbook. It should have flour and eggs all over it. Like
The sign of a good book, right?
that's what I'm
The
saying.
sign
Right.
of a good
Like,
book.
I want to, like, if I read the whole thing through and then I hand you a book that's got like, it's all frayed around the edges, but this book feels so yummy. And it's just a lovely, lovely book.
I
And I'm
know.
so grateful that you decided to spend a little time with us today, especially because you're in the UK and I'm over here. And so I'm glad we can make this happen. So thank you so much. But wait, before I let you go, I must ask you my signature question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, which is completely unrelated to anything else we've been talking about.
Oh,
Oh, it's
exciting.
very, very exciting. So obviously I'm a kitchen witch, which we have discussed a little bit. If you were to have me make a magical meal for you, what would it be and why?
Oh, magical. You say magical meal as in like what? Anything like
anything you want. Some people say, my grandmother had this recipe and no one's ever been able to recreate it. So that's really special for me. Or my favorite dish is this, or I would have you make a prosperity spell and it would be this. So like,
okay. Oh, I have one. I have one.
Food.
Okay. So I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian since I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
So like most of my life. But when I used to eat meat, I cannot. So my dad's Jamaican. My dad is a great, great, great cook.
Yeah.
I won't tell him that again, but he's a very good cook. And my favouriteest thing that he used to make when I used to eat meat was salt fish fritters. Oh,
salt fish fritters.
Yeah. So salt cod fritters. But obviously now, so if it was like magical fancy, I would love a way of eating real salt cod fritters without it being real salt cod.
So can you make me this fish dish, but no fish, in it, just the fritter?
But I want it to be exactly like.
I want it to be exactly. I've never even heard of a Jamaican salt fish fritter. I would imagine that it's like, and you said it's cod. So we're in New England and we get amazing fresh cod. It's like in season, and I have a fishmonger that literally her and her husband, they fish off the coast of Maine on like a Tuesday and then bring the fresh fish down like that you buy on Saturday. It's amazing. Wow. It's amazing. So what is that? What's even in that? Is it spicy? Is it crunchy? Like what's in it?
It's not spicy. Like a lot of Jamaican food can be spicy. So, they're so nice. So, saltfish was a way of preserving the fish back, back in the day, you know. And even like now in a lot of rural places in Jamaica where perhaps, you know, they might not have refrigeration, or it might take a long time to get from one place to the next. So, you know, saltfish was a way of preserving it. So, it's kind of preserved with salt. You soak it to get a lot of the salt off, but there's still a salty taste.
Yes.
And I know it's bad, but I'm someone who has to cover my food. I can't help it.
I would 100% eat salt and chips. And I mean, your chips, not my chips. Like, what we call fries and you call chips. I could.
Weird. Some people, it really pains me when I see people eating chips and they don't put salt on. I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, so the fish is preserved in salt and then it's soaked. So you get the majority of the salt off, but you still got that salty taste. And then it's just delicious batter, and then it's deep fried, and then we used to eat them straight from like on a Sunday morning. So my dad is like old school. My dad would like on a Sunday morning in my house growing up, we spend everyone doing housework, him included. Like Sunday would be the day we blitz the house, but everyone had to do it. And then we'd have Sunday dinner, like a roast dinner, maybe at 2:00 in the afternoon. So then you'd have like the saltfish fritters as like a brunch. And it'd be hot straight out the fryer.
That sounds absolutely divine. And I love learning about different, like I've never even heard of that. So now I'm gonna like go look it up and try to make a recipe. And I don't know if I could do it without the fish, but I love cod. And I love I can't eat shellfish. Unfortunately, I developed an allergy to shellfish. So like I've now started like, ooh, let me make this and let me make that. If it's cod or haddock or like any of the fish that we get here, it's just so I'm starving now. Okay. That sounds unbelievable. Emma Kathryn, thank you so much for spending time with us. This has been a delight. You are delightful. Your book, Witch Life, A Practical Guide to Making Everyday Magical, is fantastic. It is available anywhere books are sold. Thank you for being here. It was just lovely to have you.
I had a great time.
Thank you. Hooray. Thank God. I'm so excited. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude. Thanks, everybody.